Welcome to day 2 of RPGaDay 2023. Today's prompt is your first Gamemaster. Now, I've talked many times about my first experience playing Dungeons and Dragons. I had actually been a DM first, and for quite some time. I'd watched some local kids play at Redbeard's bookstore in Marion, Indiana. Kids that went to my high school. And I kind of picked up lessons from there and just kind of ran games in my town because they lived in neighboring communities. So, first time I sat down and played a game, our dungeon master was Shaun Keenan, and he's been a lifelong friend. He was running the Frost Giant module, and he made me roll a first level character, and I spent the whole time hiding behind a rock, pretty much. Guys were swallowed whole by white dragons and pummeled by boulders. By giants, and it was a thrilling game, and Shaun was a fun DM. He was very adversarial, and that's kind of the way it was in those earlier days, right? So he was always looking for a way to kill you, right? And the power was in his hands, of course. I mean, he could have killed you anytime he wanted, but it always felt like that, and that's the way Dungeons and Dragons kind of felt back in those days. Now, so I kind of wanted to talk a little bit, because I've talked about Shaun so much in the past. I wanted to bring up the second DM that I played with, and that was shortly after the first time I played with Shaun, and that was a girl named Laurell Klein, who you probably know better as Laurell K Hamilton, the author of the Anita Blake series. She's a New York Times bestselling author. But yeah, she was a couple of years ahead of me in school, and she was pretty kind of shy, but very smart. She was a Robert E. Howard fan, and that appealed to me right away. I was a big Conan fan at the time, and I think I've mentioned this before, that she turned me on to reading Robert E. Howard's horror stories, and had loaned me a paperback of Pigeons from Hell. So, so anyway, so she was the second DM I ever sat down with, and the things I remember most from that game, she would create these really strange magical items. Like, I remember my friend, he got this kind of like a Vorpal sword, and he would take it, and it was so sharp that if he set it on the ground and released it, it would sink to the hilt into the earth. So it was that sharp. And she was very, very creative in the way that she had the players interact with the monsters and the villages. And she was very mindful of world building. So it was obvious why she would become an author, right? So those kind of storytelling techniques were in play. And Shaun was similar in that regard, right? So he also was kind of building a world, but his world's centered around dungeons, because that's what Dungeons and Dragons was. Whereas, Laurell kind of took it, and she concerned herself more with, above the ground, what was happening there. And it was a unique perspective. And I'll be honest with you, I have not played Dungeons and Dragons or any RPG very many times. I'm almost always the Dungeon Master or Game Master. And so I appreciate all the DMs that I've had over the years, because those games were so few and far between. They stand out and are special to me. In fact, I mean, I could name all the people that have DM'd for me on one hand. The last being, my son Connor, who was a terrific DM. He DM'd for me a couple of times. where I sat in with his group of friends, and they were wonderful sessions. He's terrific, adjudicator of a game. So I appreciate anybody who takes the impetus to sit down behind that screen and to run a game and to help tell a story with their friends. And so that's our day 2. Short and sweet today. I got a lot to do. A lot left to work on Fire and Ice before the miniatures adventure game launches on Kickstarter on August the 8th. And while I have your attention, please remember today is Comic Book Day, Wednesday, August 2nd, and you can pick up Previews, which has an interview where Sarah Frazetta and I discuss our upcoming Vampirella miniseries, Dead Flowers. And you can pre-order that book, which comes out October 4th. So let your local comic book shop know that you're interested in Dead Flowers, so we can have some success with this and hopefully bring you more. All right, that's all for today. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk again real soon.